most of architecture is turning into design, not architecture. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's a different temporality. It's a different existential approach to the problem. It probably is more realistic in terms of the relationship between the client and the user groups and the building.
All through history, it's been a marginal operation.
It's a practice for a very small audience.
Well, I'm not sure. I would like the audience to be bigger.
But why is that a benefit?
Because architecture changes the way we live.
Architecture, whether we're aware of it or not, and probably
Yes.
more likely when we're not aware of it.
The more people that become educated, the better or the easier it would be to do that. At the moment, we have these very ignorant architectural competitions in which no architects are on the jury. You have a bunch of business people who are trustees that have no knowledge about architecture at all.
There's no history. There's nothing to suggest that great literature begat more great literature, or that great painting begat more great painting. Architecture is the single hardest discipline to convey any interest into someone else because they've lived in buildings their whole life and they think they know them. Let's say you're a student,
right,
and you walk into a brain surgery class, and the guy says, "Okay, get going, I'll help you along the way." You'll say, "No way." If you walk into an architecture class and the guy says, "Design a house," second year, never done anything, no problem. Bang, 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 here's a house.
Right.
It's great. But it takes a long time to learn, and even for architects, it's easy to slip back into the habits of building relationships. So it's very hard, for example, to remember that architecture sometimes uses counterintuitive ideas to produce profound poetic consequences. The questions about how architecture does its work are never going to be, for me, works that are going to increase its audience. But I do appreciate the fact that there's more and more interest.
That goes counter to the fact that when you put up an interesting building, you have visitation by an increased number of people.
Also,
because the building is interesting.
Also, if you put up any kind of exotic building at all, works that I don't particularly think are architecture, but are they're interesting buildings.
Spectacle.
They also attract a lot of attention. So before the Bilbao effect, there was the Leaning Tower of Pisa effect, and it's been going 400 years.
It was the Sydney Opera House that put modern architecture as a cultural artifact, as a transforming element in the middle of an urban fabric.
The Leaning Tower has kept the economy of that town going for 400 years. It's the only thing people go to see. The point being, I like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I like the Leaning Tower of Pisa too. But I don't need to incorporate it into an architectural discourse. So buildings that attract a lot of attention are sometimes good, sometimes not good. Buildings, that's not the measure of the work in terms of its longevity and its operations on our life, not in our life.
I think one of the problems in architecture today is this sort of egotistical need for these iconic objects.
But the problem for a critic and a theorist is different from the problem for an architect. You really do have to assume that there's a generality to your values and to your thinking on the project, and trust that there's a chance it might work. I think you've never done a project, despite what you think, that's not a Stephen Holl project. However, the way you bend to each situation, you bend with a different kind of flexibility, let's say, than others.
Today, there's a kind of crisis in architecture today where, and I know you don't believe this, but I believe that structure, the structure of a building is 20 to 25% of the construction cost of a building, and therefore it needs to play in the meaning of the building. All of that's gone in your 2010 envelopes, Princeton University. And it's the thesis that you could just put a kinky skin on and then ignore the structure. Anyway.
I'm more interested in structure than you are. And by the way, structurally, what John did was to recognize that we like one kind of structure, the structure of a 20th century female or male model. What's really interesting is a structure of a person with a bent back and a cane. That is a structural problem far more interesting than a vertical building, which shows far more existential sensitivity through the formal language of architecture than what we keep. We keep building youth and rectitude in the name of structure. So you're full of shit when you say to me, I'm not interested in structure, and you are. You're not. You're getting interested in it. But look, this is the last of the great macho tricks. A
Cantilever?
Whereas if you were to go down a little bit, it becomes a figure. Cantilevers are bad ideas, in my opinion. Direct the 90-degree.
So that means Frank Lloyd Wright and falling water is a completely bad idea.
No, great idea.
It's all about cantilever.
Cantilevers had a great moment. Here's my history of the cantilever. Starts off as chicanery, a trick that people learned how to do that wowed other people as magic. Went to bravado, which is Frank Lloyd Wright and the modern ethics.
1940.
Yeah. Now it's chauvinism. Now it's just bad
So
trickery.
CCTV, Rem's gigantic cantilever at the top of
Uninteresting in me at
It's-
all. Look how easy it would have been to give that a poetic figurality. If you soften the cantilever, and you also introduce the possibility of it's not really motion, but a kind of posture. So what's missing from architecture is anything like its exploration of the full range of postures that it could indulge. And that means it belongs to a metaphysical ethic, not to a structural possibility. Anybody with a finite point analysis program today can do cantilevers at any degree and in any posture with the same simplicity.
One of the benefits of critical architectural discourse can actually be a consequence. Here, in our project for the ecology building, I realized that I didn't really need to send out these large cantilevers. I could pull up this concrete bamboo formed wall and pick up and reduce the steel by $1.5 million. I saved $1.5 million in steel reduction because of Jeff Kipnis's critique about the cantilever.